What's going on, everybody, and welcome to the Kanoli Show. Today we've got Miss Liz Clark. Fun fact, she was actually my ninth grade history teacher, so please welcome her, Miss Clark.
Hi, Holly. It's good to see you again.
It's good to see you, too. So tell me a little bit about yourself.
Well, as you know, we met when you were in my ninth grade history class, and I have been teaching ninth grade history since 2001. I actually started teaching in September of 2001. So
Really?
Yeah.
That was
I started teaching, and then
Yeah.
September 11th happened. It was like, wow, okay.
Like a crazy first year to start your career and stuff.
It was a different couple of weeks getting started in my teaching career.
Because it was almost like it was a different vibe. It's like it wasn't just like, oh, early first day of school and everyone's all happy and positive. It's like, oh, so a traumatic experience happened.
Right.
Now I have to also still learn and be a teacher, and it's a traumatic experience right away.
Right. And so how do you balance all of these different things that are happening? So it was definitely a very challenging first couple of weeks, but every year that I've taught, I've always taught ninth grade.
Yeah.
I really like ninth graders. I think that they're a lot of fun. It's like that perfect mix of it's the last year of middle school mindset when they're still like fun and a little bit goofy and so willing to go along with some things. But it's also they're also, you can also put that pressure on them to like, come on, you can be a little bit more mature.
Yeah, it's like grow up a little bit.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So you can, depending on what the situation is, you can play to either one of those. And if you teach juniors, it's harder to play to those two different mindsets.
Because they're starting to get into a car, they can drive, some of them. They're getting this feeling of like, oh, we can go to prom and thinking about colleges. So they're entering that next phase of life. But as a freshman, at least from when I remember being in your class and stuff, like, I remember thinking like, oh, I'm looking mature, I'm in high school, but I was still so goofy and silly and free. So it's like you said, it's that balance of having that.
Yes.
Oh, that's awesome. So just kind of going off of like the teaching, everything. So like being a teacher for, again, like over 20 years there, it's like, what do you think that has been like a change in over that 20 years time span of like being a teacher?
So one of the biggest changes obviously has been the integration of technology into people's day-to-day experiences, because like in 2001 when I first started teaching, there were obviously cell phones, but like adults had them. My first couple years teaching, you never had to tell students to put phones away. It didn't happen.
Yeah.
So that has become something that is so much more, it's just a factor now that you have to figure out, how am I going to work this in? Because you can't deny it. There's no point in trying to work against the technology. You have to find a way to make it work for you. So that would probably be the biggest change. And one other change that we talk about a lot, just when when all the kids leave at the end of the day, like we as teachers, we a lot of times come together and it's like okay, we've been professional all day.
Yeah.
Now we're going to say some things maybe and just kind of like get all this stuff out there. We're like, be professional. You are the adult. You have to do that. But at the end of the day, you're like, I'm still a person and this kid really ticked me off today. So we kind of get that all out to each other. But we talk about how kids are very much the same in that kids will push boundaries. That's what teenagers do. It is the nature of the beast. You understand that. They will test and test and test until they like hit the resistance. But it does feel like socially there are so many more allowances and so many more like, that's okay. And like, it feels like the boundaries have gotten much wider than when we first started. So kids are still pushing boundaries. It just feels like socially the boundaries have gotten wider.
And like what they're able to say and do. And like I think with technology, because of that, like you're able to say and comment and do whatever you want over the phone because no one's going to check you in person.
Right.
No one's going to punch you in the face if you insult them over the phone.
Right.
But if you insult someone in real life, like you might actually get smacked in the face.
Right.
And people almost forgot that there's this boundary that technology has kind of allowed them to break. Like you were saying, like the boundary has become so much larger and they're still pushing it. So, because naturally they're going to push boundaries.
That's what people do.
And like then it's like, how much are they going to push until it's like, wait, like time out. We got to reset the clock here.
Right. We need to like rein these boundaries in. And how you bring boundaries in, I mean, that's
the hard part.
That's hard. Yes. It's so much easier to just keep them smaller and, gradually let out. But it feels like there's been this social letting out that personally, it feels like it's gone too far.
Are some things that go on, I guess, like when you guys obviously like talk to other teachers and like colleagues, it's like, because of that, when the kids leave, and again, this is you guys adults talking like, hey, this kid pissed me off. Is he doing this kid did this kid did this. What are some stories, I guess, that happen that are maybe different than maybe 5 years ago, even 10 years ago?
I think the thing that generally, like the part that gets people really upset is the lack of basic respect that you give to a person. Like, I don't necessarily expect that I am treated a certain way because I am your teacher. I mean, there are certain guidelines that I think, but it's not like I'm above other people. I just feel like you shouldn't treat anyone like this. If someone asks you, like, can you please do this? And when someone just ignores you, that's like, why would you treat anybody like that? And that is something that has become, within the last 5 years, so much more prevalent. And it's like, I can deal with so much. You know, kids have bad days. It happens. And when you've worked with kids for as long as so many of us have, you've seen a lot of it. But that is something where it's like just the absolute ignoring of something that was asked of you, which is a reasonable request, and it was asked in a respectful manner, and to just pretend like, I'm not even going to give you the respect to look at you. Like, oh. Yeah. That's the one.
And that makes sense because it's like you're, first off, not acknowledging that a human being is speaking to you. That's the number one thing.
Right.
Second, you're basically telling me I don't respect you, I don't care about you, nor does whatever you're saying matter to me at all.
Right.
And it's like, that's where it's like, okay, this is a little offensive towards me because now you're not disrespecting me as a teacher, but you're disrespecting me as a person.
Yes.
And that's where it's like, okay, hold up, time out. You can't just do that to me.
Right.
Because I did nothing to offend you or hurt you. And granted, me as a student, like I remember thinking like, sometimes I would feel embarrassed when I knew I was talking out of turn or like I was talking to a classmate and the teacher would be like, hey, I'm like, you know, you feel embarrassed a little bit, but like, do you feel like that sense of that embarrassment isn't there anymore? That like shame of like, I shouldn't probably be doing this.
Yes.
Really?
Yes.
That's kind of scary though.
And it's not with everybody. There are so many students who absolutely, like you can give them a quick, hey, and they pull themselves right back in line. But then there are some where it's like, and it's been a growing number, and it's still a
rather than like
portion.
one kid or two kids, it's like 5, 6, 7 kids.
Right. You might have like this pocket of kids, and you try like, okay, well, like strategic seat people, but it's hard sometimes. So you kind of keep your fingers crossed that you are able to develop something of a relationship with the student prior to it getting to something like that. But you know, it doesn't always work.
Yeah, because
most
sometimes
of the time it does. But
do you think that one of the ways you can do it is like maybe like say like, hey, like Jason, can you stay after class? I just want to talk to you for a second, or something like that. Do you think that even like individually talking to them, hey, like could you? Does that you think that works, or do you think that's one of those like where they listen but then they're kind of looking down and not like paying attention?
So one of the things you learn early on in teaching is you never give a student a stage. Like if you already have someone who is doing that, if you directly like escalate it, you know, take it up a step, like that student, you know, they're probably going to just dig in further and push back. So generally speaking, I do not. I will quietly walk by someone, ask them to do whatever. It's usually like, you put your phone away. And we move on. And if they don't, I do a lot more independent work at this point than I did when you were a student. And I'll at that point, I'll be like, come on. And we just go out into the hallway and I try to have a quick conversation. And if I feel like it has not really made the steps that I was hoping to, at that point, I'll try to bring in a principal. But usually I don't have to do that. Most of the time, I've been pretty lucky that most of my students, most of the time, are really just decent people for the most part. So.
And because, like you said, like people can have bad days, or like you never know what someone's going through at home, or like something happened with a friend, or someone made fun of them, or they feel embarrassed, or there's so many factors, especially as a 9th grader. You know, like so many things can happen that could be the end of the world for you as a 9th grader. So it's like you never know, maybe it's a bad day. That's okay. You can forgive and forget that moment.
Absolutely.
But it's like when you see that constant disrespect, like you were saying, like someone's constantly ignoring you, constantly making you feel like as a human being, you're just being disrespectful. It's like, okay, hold up, time out. Something more is going on here. How do I then solve it?
Right.
Okay, that makes sense. And kind of going off of like the more independent work versus group work, do you think it's harder now to have group work? Or is that why I kind of focus more on independent work? Or
So I realized during this school year that I shifted a lot of the way I was teaching during COVID because everyone had to.
Yeah.
And then even last year, when we came back last school year, like everyone was still wearing masks. And I was like, oh, I'm not going to put kids in groups because what if I get like that super nervous student, or the student isn't nervous, but they go home and they're talking about their day and they say, well, we were in a group, we did this. And then the parents are like, you were facing each other. And if that turns into a situation, I don't want that. So even for last school year, I still had kids largely doing independent work. And then it hit me this year. It's like, oh, I've just sort of like fallen into this. This is how I do it now.
Yeah.
And so I'm trying to force myself, like, okay, how did I used to do this to get people talking?
Because I remember, now I think about it, like our class, I feel like there was a good amount of like, it was a lot of group discussion too. Like a lot of us like would talk in a big class. Like we'd like you'd show us something on the board. You're like, okay, so what do you guys think about this? Is robber baron or capitalists of industry in the terminology here? I remember thinking like someone raised their hand and be like, oh, I think this because this, and someone else in the class would say this, and like some people would just interject like, oh, what about this? And then it kind of ended up becoming where like we weren't raising our hands as much.
Yes.
But it was more like, what about this? And it was almost like the students were talking to each other, and you were just kind of like mitigating the conversation. Like, hey, go here, and you were kind of like pushing us down different avenues of thinking. And I've always enjoyed that because for me, I thought that was the way I learned best. It's like when I'm in a group talking to people. So like, do you think that you've kind of like, it's harder to get kids to do that naturally? Or do you think because of like the post-COVID fallout, basically, it's like hard to like get yourself even to be like, hey, everyone group talk?
So I always love that because that is my preferred way of teaching. So when you have a class where people are willing to do that, that's like the dream right there.
Yeah.
And I think that from like, 2020, March, through, what was that then? So June of 2022, that didn't really happen. And I never realized how much I rely on facial expressions from a teaching perspective.
Because when the mask is covering, you can't really tell if someone's smiling, sad, or even that little smirk, like listening.
Yes.
It matters because then you're reading that body language. Because again, like sitting at a desk, your hands are usually underneath the desk, or they're like sitting at like on the table. So it's like you can't really read too much body language if someone's not standing. If they're sitting, so you read their face.
Yes.
So
teaching is this art form, and that's part of it is being able to read your audience. And you can tell, like, oh, they're starting to get bored. I better, like, switch how I'm doing this or speed it up or something. And that was totally taken away. And so I just had to teach a different way because I wasn't willing to risk putting people in groups and making students uncomfortable or having their families be uncomfortable. And then this year, it was just, well, that's how I did it last year. And I go back and I review my notes. And I'm excited to be able to get back. Now that I've made that, like, that light bulb went off, I was like, oh, to redirect for next year. So that's my plan.
That's kind of cool because, like, as a teacher, it's like, especially doing it for so many years, it's like, oh, I've done this. But the thing is, you don't go back to maybe, like, your 10 years ago notes. You go back to what you did last year. And then, like you said, you almost tend to forget, like, wait, last year was a different type of year. Or the year before was a way different type of year than it's going to be in the future years. So it's like, how do I get back to doing that social aspect of communication? And kind of going off of that, do you think that kids themselves are like as confident maybe as they were 5-10 years ago maybe in like the social settings talking, or is it a little more harder to get them like naturally talk to one another?
It's harder to get them to naturally talk. I would say that it's better this school year than it was last. I mean, last school year kids would still, like, when there was the opportunity to work together, very often they would just tend to stay by themselves. So that was it was unexpected. It was something I did not fully anticipate as a teacher. But I do feel like this year is a little bit better. But so many kids are either accustomed to that safety of being able to say something online where you're either kind of anonymous or you're speaking to an already friendly audience that I think kids have gotten so used to that, that there is this new level of nerves of speaking in front of a group. Because when I was growing up, yeah, you'd call a friend or two after school and you'd spend a little bit of time on the phone, but you spent most of your time interacting live.
Yeah.
And that live interaction for a lot of kids is gone. I was talking with my 10th graders just a couple days ago about how much time they spend on their phones. And so I was like, just check to see what your daily average is. And the one girl was like, I'm under 3 hours. And somebody else was like, I'm at 5 hours. And somebody else was like, 12 hours. It's like 12 hours of your day on the phone, and just thinking about how different his interactions and his social life is from a lot of his peers. Not all, obviously, but a lot. And particularly from my experience growing up, I was like, obviously that didn't exist.
Yeah. Imagine, like, I talk to a bunch of, like, people my age about this. Like, oh, what's your guys' screen time? It's like, I've had friends with screen times from 2-3 hours in my own to up to like 14, 16 hours. And one of my friends, again, like, he's always on his phone because that's where his business is.
Which is different.
And it's like your business is behind the phone. And me as well, like, a lot of my stuff happens behind the phone. A lot of times, like, or I'm behind my laptop screen and my phone screen is here. So a lot of times I look, I'm like, I wonder how much hours a day my screen is, like, in my face, regardless of what I'm doing with it, if it's productive or not. So, like, now all your bank accounts are on your phone. Now everything you do is on your phone. So it's like, when I talk to people on the phone, or if I'm calling a client, or I'm calling someone I need to speak with, it's on the phone. So then it's like, I look at my screen time, and some days I'm like 12 hours, I'm like 13 hours. I'm like, oh, am I really on my phone this much? And the thing is, like, I still work out every day. I still do things that are active, and I'm outside talking to people. And I'm grateful that, like, I'm not like a socially awkward person either. So, like, the screen time to me isn't where I get my dose of, like, speaking to people. But a lot of the times it's where I am talking to people. And my one friend who does, like, he edits videos and stuff for his music and all these things, he's telling me, like, dude, I was 17 hours today. And I'm like, he's like, I literally didn't get off my phone because I was just working all day. But he's like, I wasn't talking to anyone, I was just doing my stuff. But then, like, even for me, sometimes, like, say I go on social media, or I go on a website, or I go here to watch some videos, or go on YouTube, and then I look at my, like, screen time, like, oh, let me see how long I was on it. It's like 30 minutes here, an hour here, 25 minutes here, and it's like, I spent 2 hours on social media platforms all day on my day off, just chilling, doing nothing. But it's like, wait, like, that 2 hours I could have done so much more stuff. And you forget, like, wait, this time that I'm just losing, this is just wasting my time.
Right, it's that non-renewable resource.
Yeah, it's the time. And kind of going off of, like, then, like, the phones and the time that you're spending is, do you think that, again, like, there's a correlation maybe between, like, the kids who spend, like, a lot of time on their phones and, like, only really talk to people behind their phones and how they talk behind their phones? Do you think that it kind of correlates to, like, even, like, their social relationships within the classroom or even outside of a classroom?
I'm not sure about how much it correlates to relationships outside of the classroom, because I don't really see that. Inside the classroom, I would say that the biggest area is kids are not comfortable just kind of starting to make small talk with someone who sits near them. I saw and this was years ago, where somebody made this statement that phones are like pacifiers for adults, that whenever you're in an uncomfortable situation, people immediately take out their phone. And I think that, you know, kids a lot of times, yes, it is, but they also see adults doing it too. So whenever they get slightly uncomfortable, they're not sure what to do, or they don't want to seem like that kid who, oh, these people around me are talking and I'm not, but if I have my phone out, then it seems like, oh, I'm doing something too.
I'm busy doing something.
Exactly, I got my own thing going on, yeah.
And that's actually interesting, because, like, sometimes I even notice, like, watching other people do it, I'm like, I just notice them that, like, they feel like they're not in the conversation. We're in, like, a group setting, maybe 10 people in a room all talking. I notice, like, 2 people pull out their phones. One person pulls out their phone. Then, like, another person pulls it out. And it's like everyone's feeling this, like, okay, I'm here. And then, like, they kind of look around the room, like, if they don't feel like they're part of the conversation, or they're not forcing themselves to be part of the conversation, then they kind of get this awkward feeling of, like, if I pull out my phone, then I can, like, pretend. And a lot of times, like, people always make jokes about this. Like, I wasn't even on my phone. Like, I just pulled it out because, like, I got nervous.
Right. Checking the weather. It's something really important
refreshing something.
Is the rain coming? Yeah. Nope. Okay.
And it's kind of cool because it makes me realize that when you enter technology into like students and kids, like how different their development could be. You know, it's like I remember we were saying like, say you're walking by someone and you're just like, hello, you make eye contact. You know, you're walking by a human being and a human being. You're gonna look them in the eye. It's a sense of like protection of yourself and like know your awareness. You know, have awareness. But it's like now instead of even looking and giving eye contact,
it's the phone. It is the I don't have to do something that might make me slightly uncomfortable. And, you know, but like that discomfort is where growth happens.
Yeah.
And so I feel like whenever people do that, they're, you know, long run, you're cheating yourself. Like you've got to do this. You've got to be comfortable looking at people and engaging in you're very comfortable in your virtual world, but you have to be comfortable in your actual world as well. And, you know, that's like that honesty check where if you catch yourself doing that, you're like, I should probably work on that.
Yeah. Do you think that adding in, because again, going on like the base of technology, like adding in things like AI, like artificial intelligence now, again, for me, like being out of college, everything, like seeing the tools that are available now is insane. Like some of the tools, like all these, the new features, all these AI businesses keep coming up. It's things like ChatGPT, things like Bard, things like, I remember watching something like Midjourney, which is like creating basically graphic design things. Where you can plug in keywords and it'll basically draw you whatever you want to see. And it's like really incredible AI tools that again a robot is doing for you. So do you think that like that getting entered into the high schools now is like causing some mayhem or not? Because like me personally, I feel like if I was in high school and I had these tools, I would be using them. That's me being honest. So it's like, what do you think about that whole situation?
So again, you cannot like ignore the technology. You just have to figure out, well, how can you make it work for you? So personally, with my 9th graders, they're allowed to take an essay home, but I try to, like, we do it in class together, and I want to see, like, at least see your introduction and seeing the progress. And, you know, I would say that a lot of kids, and maybe it's because you're 9th graders, and so there's still, like, that little bit of young innocence to them, and they don't want to test it that much. It's not really a big issue there. With the 10th graders, we used to, like the first year I taught AP, they would do a take-home essay. And when I was first informed we do a take-home essay, I was like, are you kidding me? Seriously? If this is a test and you're going to let them take it home, like, what do you think is going to happen?
Yeah.
So I managed to, you know, talk us out of that because I just, like, I don't see the benefit. I think that you have to not hammer kids too much with, you grow. You practice writing it. And I'm not looking for perfection, and don't expect perfection of yourself. Like, let's try to write a sentence, and then let's talk about how does that sentence look. And I will talk you through sentence by sentence if that's what you want. So I think that one of the ways you combat it is by not presenting the assignment like it's this big, intimidating thing. You've got to present it as, we're going to learn how to do this, and it's going to be something that's a little bit challenging, but that's why I'm here. Like, I'm the teacher. That's my job, is to help you with this. So if you make it more open, I think that is one way that you can address a lot of the issues before they become issues. And it's not obviously going to affect or help everyone. There's still going to be some people. But if you can catch most of the kids and get what you're really going for, I consider that a win.
Yeah.
But the other way I keep thinking about how to use it is trying to get students to write better. Sometimes it's hard, like, okay, well, then what do we, you know, there's this idea of having mentor sentences. But sometimes I'm like, well, can someone just have it? Can someone just make for me, like, here's the prompt, the good sentence and the bad sentence? Because I know how to write the good sentence, but it's hard for me to come up with sometimes the bad sentence because I have been writing for so long that my brain just doesn't work that way. Whereas someone who is much newer to the writing process, they come up with some things and you're like, oh, we can, you've got some fundamental ideas that just clearly need some developing. So I was thinking about, what if you could have, like, the chat thingy I'm not even sure what all the initials are. I know it's there. Have that create an essay and then use it as, what is it that makes this a good essay? So use that as like the mentor essay,
a learning
and the evaluative process of, well, this is the essay I wrote. And then I look at this one that AI created, and I see that when I compare these two sentences, theirs is much better because. So that's how I would envision using it, hopefully as a tool in the classroom, and because you can't make it the enemy.
Yeah,
it's there
because it already exists. It's like once it exists, it's like elephant in the room. It's like we're not going to talk about how all of us can make different essays with the same prompt, like because it can funnel out like countless different prompts. I was looking at a different AI. It was basically saying like it was giving drafts. So I think it was the Google's one bar that they're creating, and it was like it shows drafts. So it was like draft 1, 2, and 3, and then it goes off of those drafts and has individual drafts within those drafts and says why they didn't select this one, and this one.
That's brilliant.
And it's like it shows you that like this is why this isn't good. This is why this one was better. This is the final product that it outputted to you. And it's one of those things where it's like, okay, this is a crazy, amazing tool, but now it requires that laziness, where it's like, as a student, it's like, why even do work when I can just have AI output this for me? And it's the same mentality that I remember when I was growing up. A lot of teachers would be like, these computers, we have to go to the library and look through sources and articles. Now you guys can just write Google Scholar on Google and find scholarly articles easily. I remember even everyone saying like, oh, Wikipedia isn't a good source. But growing up, I remember looking at Wikipedia, like there's sources at the bottom of Wikipedia. So growing up, like I guess I thought I was like wanting up teachers. I would use Wikipedia for almost everything when I was in high school because I looked at the sources at the bottom. And if there were scholarly articles, I just went to the source itself and then went to it. So I did what teacher wanted, and I still used a very easy source of Wikipedia giving me everything.
Right. And there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, and particularly because you are looking into the sources. Go to the source, make sure it's something that is fairly reliable, and then why not use it? You can't ignore the technology that has been created. You're just hurting yourself, and you're creating like unnecessary tension in your classroom then.
Because then people almost want to do it to like prove a point.
Right.
Like, because again, like you said, kids will push boundaries. So they know that you're saying not to do this. Oh, I'm gonna get away with it because it's natural for a student to do that. And kind of going off of that is like rules in like a classroom versus rules in like the school itself. How different is it than when I was there versus now in the sense of phones, technology? Like, is it more like lenient? Because I remember like even in study halls, we were never allowed to have our phones out. People get like teachers walking like, hey, put your phones away. I remember thinking like people got mad at that, but like I'm assuming it's different now. Or
oh, entirely. So I can't remember how long ago they changed it, but it started with, phones would be allowed in study hall and the cafeteria. Because there were plenty of teachers who were on lunch duty who were like, this is what I do like all day, and this is not what I want to. It's not even my rule. It's my boss is telling me I have to do this. And I'm like, So they would walk around and the question was like, what is the harm? Like, what is the reason for this rule? And when people had a hard time explaining the reason for it or, really selling it, it's like, well, then maybe it shouldn't be a rule. Think about what really matters. If you have a real reason, I mean, one of the things they used to talk about was they didn't want kids wearing earbuds in the hallways because you can't hear other people. Like there are times when I would go to correct a student on something like, hey, you need to stop doing that, and they just walk right by me. And then realizing they're not ignoring me. They just literally did not hear me. But again, you've created that tension where I'm like, for real? You're ignoring me like that? And then I realized, oh, no, they're not. Because then I'll say it again. And they're like, they'll look and they'll, what? And I'll say it. And they're like, oh, okay. And they'll do whatever it was. So
and they're getting so inconspicuous now. Like they're so tiny. And there's even ones that are even small that just fit right in the ear. And like I even think like, I remember for us, like, if you had your headphones on because it was wired, there's no Bluetooth stuff, and if you had Bluetooth ones, they were kind of big and funky. So if people had them, like I remember I would like sneak the wire underneath my shirt, so that all you can see is like this much of the wire, and like I'd have it on the side of the teacher was an app if I wanted to like just sit there and listen to something. And I remember thinking like I was being so sly, but now like you don't even have to try. You can just have like one pod in and just sit like this.
Yep. Or girls just do
their hair. Yeah.
And so like I've got a couple of my students where I'm like, like, let me see the ears. And, they're good-natured about it. And almost every time when I'm thinking of one person in particular, she's always like,
like
every time. And I say, like, okay, guys, it's time. We're going to get started with class. Because then within the classroom, I've definitely eased up because, again, like it really happened after COVID where it's like, now that I'm having the kids do a lot more individual work, because we only have the 2 levels. So you have some kids who just get through their work very quickly and other kids who legitimately need more time. So I'm like, what am I just going to tell this kid, like, congratulations, you've done all of your work. Now I'm going to give you more work to do while you're waiting for them to finish up. Like, that's not going to fly. So I just sort of look at it as these are your tasks for the day. And get your jobs done. And when you are, so if you're just copying notes down, then yes, you can listen to something. When we review the notes later, obviously everything should come out, phone should go away. But
that's even that to me, listening to that, that's to me, like, obviously, like, because I graduated in 2016, like, to me, that sounds crazy. Like, if we had, like, a phone near the classroom or a headphone or anything, it was like, you give it to me to the end of the day. Like, you weren't using that phone to the end of the day. Like, you were in trouble for the rest of the day. And
so now it's more of like I look at it as trying to teach kids how to responsibly use their phones. Like, when someone is talking to you, you should take your AirPods out, just as a matter of respect. Because sometimes they say, oh, they're not on. Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. But just take them out.
Some of them also have, like, noise canceling, though. Like, the newer ones. I don't have, like, any of the newer ones. I like wired ones. And, like, I remember I bought, like, the earlier generation AirPods when they first came out because I was like, I got to try these out because they look so cool. But I remember, like, when I tried the newer ones, like, they noise cancel. Even when you just put them in your ear, and, like, I didn't like the feeling, like, my head was, like, squeezed in. Like, I was like, I don't like this. And I never got, like, the newer versions. So, like, even if you have them in, like, they could be noise canceling even a little bit.
Right.
You know?
So, and actually I read an article a little bit ago that was talking about how more and more people are going back to the, like, corded ones because it is this universal signal of don't bother me.
Yeah.
Like, I want to be left alone right now. And so with AirPods, you can't tell that. Or with anything Bluetooth, you just can't tell that. Whereas now it's like, please.
I got the wired ones.
Yes.
And I think the wired ones are, like, I think something, obviously I don't know how accurate the study is, and we really don't have the knowledge and studies of, like, 20, 30, 50 years to know. But, like, everyone's like, oh, like, the Bluetooth connectivity, like, does it do stuff to your brain? Because, like, if you have a Bluetooth thing here and a Bluetooth thing here, how do they connect? Is it going through your brain? Is that technology, radiation, all those things that people talk about? You know, it's like, is that affecting us? Do we know if that's affecting us? Do we even have studies long enough to know if it's affecting us?
Right.
You know, even if it's minuscule, how minuscule? And it's like all these things. So it's like more and more I've started thinking, like, maybe I shouldn't wear them. Maybe I should wear them. But they're so convenient. And it's like the convenience versus, like, the practicality of, like, wait, could this be harming me? You know?
See, it's not something I deal with necessarily because when I was a kid, my mom was a teacher also. And so when she would drive me home from school, because for 8th and 9th grade, we were in the same building, and I would always want to put on the radio. And she was like, no, silence. You know, 13 and 14-year-old me, I was like, oh.
Like, you're buzzkill. Like,
yes, why can't we just listen to music? And, but now when my day ends, I'm like, silence. Just to have that quiet. So I do not listen to music very much. It is very much like, for me, a Sunday morning, we're cooking family breakfast.
Like, it's like in the background kind of noise.
Right. But, I mean, I never have AirPods in or music in my ears. It's also this weird thing I have about, I like to be aware of my surroundings.
Yeah, same. I'm the same way.
And if I have something in, I'm like, I feel like I'm constantly checking my surroundings.
And you're, like, checking your shoulder, yes. And it's like you're nervous because, like, you can't hear, like, that. Like, I know it sounds crazy, but, like, it goes back to our natural, like, primal instincts where, like, you know how it's like when you watch cats or National Geographic, like, they're, like, tapping. Like, you can't even hear a cat when it comes up, like a leopard or a cheetah. When they're, like, hunting or stalking their prey, they're tapping in the same spot they already stepped in because they can trust that it's not going to make a noise. But it's like when you hear you could turn and you hear it and you're out.
Right.
So it's that same natural instinct that we have as humans. We have that same feeling.
Absolutely.
So if you can't hear it and you're blocking that out, like, I know, like, people in the city, for example, something I saw recently, people more and more, I started noticing this like a couple years ago, but more and more people are driving with headphones on.
Yes, I don't understand that.
I cannot believe that because I drive usually with silence, or if, like, there's, like, a podcast going on, or, like, maybe, like, I'm listening to, like, an Islamic video or something about something. I'm like, you know, this is a cool video I'm listening and learning about, but I don't have it, like, blasted that I can't hear someone honk or look in, like, you know, because, like, you know, it's like turn the music down so I could see. It's
yes.
like it's like turn the music down so I can see. It's like, why, but it's true because our senses, it's like overload.
Yes.
For overloading our auditory, we can't use our other senses as high. So it's like if it's silent, we're able to see things better, hear things more clearly. Makes sense. So like when I see people with headphones on talking, I'm like, I can't believe that, because sometimes when I'm talking on the phone, it's coming through my car. It's connected to my car. So like I can hear like them talking through the car, seeing them, but I'm also hearing still outside. When people have headphones in and they're driving, I just cannot understand how.
No, I'm with you on that. I see that. I'm like, what? And don't you ever, like, I wish it were socially acceptable just like open, like knock on the window, be like, talk me through it.
Yeah.
Like, what is your reasoning?
I need to know how you do this.
I'm not here to judge. I'm just honestly curious why you're doing this.
And it's like scary because like I know like especially when I travel to Egypt, like the way people drive there is way different. Obviously, like no one really follows the lines on the road, even though there are lines, and everyone's driving so close together. But when I'm in Egypt, like everyone's like uses the honker, like the honk, as like a hey, I'm turning, or hey, I'm about to move in, like make a move, like so it's like everyone's constantly communicating with each other, like a beehive almost, and we're all moving into this next space. And every time I'm in Egypt, I'm grateful that I don't see this, but I don't think I've seen an accident once in Egypt. But in America, I constantly see accidents. But there's rules here, regulations of drive through this way, do this, do that. Well, because everyone there is constantly communicating and driving, you don't see as many like accidents. And like you got motorcycles going through people while cars are also moving. So I'm thinking, how is this like not a problem with like life? You know, it's like you see the phones, you see the problem that it can create, the headphones in, all these things, and then you see like less accidents in places where they're actually honking, communicating.
Right.
And it's not like
but
rude
it's the
to
communicating.
honk.
That's what it comes down to.
Oh, that's awesome.
And you're right. It's like it's not seen as rude. I've often said I wish there were like two different horns on a car. Like one is you're like you did something really wrong, and then also the other one's like, excuse me.
Yeah. As I saw like a video recently. It was like it's like a courtesy honk. It's like a little boop, boop, like a little like you tap it, but sometimes like you try to tap it lately, but like you kind of slam down.
Yes, and it doesn't come out. You're like a little more. Oh, that was too much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's like cool because like nowadays everyone's like gets offended for the honk. But like for me, like someone's like on their phone like in front of me, and I'm like watching them. Like I saw it turn green, and like it's happened to me. I've been the one distracted on my phone. So like sometimes when someone's like boop, boop, I'm like oh my bee, and like I'll like kind of raise my hand like my bee, like my apologies.
Right.
But if someone's in front of me the same thing, I'm like boop boop, same thing.
Right.
But sometimes like who like lace the horn, like I only lace the horn if someone does something absurd.
Right.
And I'm like, you just almost killed 3 people. Like you just did not look at all. Like what are you doing? And it's like sometimes like it's always someone who's on their phone. Like I was like, dude, you're driving. Like, and granted, I'm a criminal of this too. I use my phone when I drive. You know, most of us do. But it's like sometimes when I do it, it's like I make sure if I'm gonna do it, I'm not A, matter merge, 2, in the way of anyone. And it's like you make sure like okay, if you're gonna look at it quick, and then try to put it on your dashboard or move it somewhere so you're not still on it. But it's like to send full-on text messages or like obviously people always make fun. It's like when people put mascara on while they're driving. It's like I think that's so scary because sometimes I wonder something with my eye while I was driving. So I remember trying to open like the mirror and I was like, you know what? No, I'm gonna drive with one eye because just even trying to do that, I was so nervous. I was like, I don't know how people even do this. So I was like, nah, I'm just gonna drive with like itch it out or something.
Right.
But that's awesome. So I kind of wanted to go into kind of talking to you about like things that like you're passionate about personally as well. So I know like one of the things you said you're passionate about was like when you make a good lesson plan or kind of I kind of want to go off of like that kind of part.
So like for me, that is one of the most fun parts about teaching is sitting there and planning it out and like constructing, you know, okay, we're going to talk about this and then we'll bring this piece in, and is it going to be something they'll do as groups, or is this going to be an individual written response? And I really like the creative process of putting together a good lesson. And I like that with teaching, you're able to, like, you know, you do it again later in the same day. And so you can make those little changes throughout, and then I'll make my notes about, like, okay, like this part was not great. You bring in something else, or you know, switch up the order of it, the presentation, because it'll flow more naturally. So I really like that part. And like there's some days where, you know, it goes beautifully. And I'm like, somebody should have been recording that. Like that is how we do it here. So when you have days like that where it just all works smoothly and the kids are on board and they're getting it and they're talking and they're giving answers, you're like, this is it.
It's
right
like that
here.
feeling of like a job well done feeling. It's like this worked the way I thought it would work, and it did, and even better than I thought it would work.
Right. Love that.
What is like your favorite, like I guess obviously you teach history and stuff. So like what is like your favorite part of history to teach within like the curriculum that you have? Like what's kind of like some of your favorite like parts of history to teach?
I really like teaching the causes of the Civil War because it's so rich, it's so deep. So I like teaching that. I've discovered I actually like teaching about the West, like post-Civil War, as all these people are moving out and like kind of like conquering the West, and I present it as, you know, the development of the Old West. So you go from Native Americans and buffalo to cowboys and herds of cattle everywhere. So watching that transition. And I think one of the things I like most about it is because we live in a city environment, the idea is so foreign to so many of the kids. So like I'll show videos about, you know, the 13-year-old who is the like rodeo champion. And they're just like, people do that? And so just
like
to
country
watch.
living, like the country style living, or like that, again, like that rural style of living, and how different it is from what they're accustomed to at home.
Right. So and I think that's probably it, is because you can talk about what they did and like, oh, in 1868, blah, blah, blah. But then when you show them, but last year, this is what it was like when they were, you know, getting into their lassoing competition. And the kids are like, that's mean. They're like getting the cattle. I'm like, but they're also thinking about why they do that, because if the cow goes off by itself, it's probably going to be killed. So, you know, the cow's okay. It's all right. So I like that it is a very immediate connection for them as well.
Yeah, like a back then into like a, oh, but this happens culturally still now. And it's kind of cool because sometimes like for me, like when I like think about what I liked as a student, I always liked the things that I could relate to, but also wanted to achieve. So it's like for me, like I always loved learning about like the like compromises that happened, the where things kind of did work, you know, where it's like this person wanted this to happen, this person wanted this to happen. They were kind of battling against this idea, but then they both met halfway. I'm like, you know what? That's cool. Like to me, like I love hearing those types of stories in history. Obviously, for me, something I really liked learning about was like, wait, like this America was basically had all these buffalo, but then they basically wiped out all the buffalo to basically wipe out Native Americans. Like this was like you said, conquering like that, like keep pushing and pushing and pushing until like. Again, like that, like supremacy of like, oh, we're the best, we're this, we want to destroy everyone around us in our sight. But then to watch it, understand it's like why there's problems now. So, for example, like you know how like there's like Tornado Alley and stuff like in the West and stuff. The reason why like a lot of those places have more like bad like land and stuff in certain spots is because the buffalo, when they grazed and they moved all around that spot, fertilized the land. America was more, and especially in that region, it was very lively, green, lush, and like meadows. But now it's more like barren, and it's barren because of the fact that they killed the natural animal that was already living here. Because when animals defecate and they move around and travel, that's how things get like spread and start terraforming. And when you learn about that, it's like that's history. It's like even though it's like sounds like very like plants and environmental stuff, but like when I learned about that, I was like, wait, that's so cool. Like you learn like, wait, the problems can happen over time. Like this, it seemed like a little win, right? Oh, we took this land, we killed 4 million buffalo, but then 100 years later, this is a problem that ensued because of it. I think that's the cool thing about history that I always like learning, and like in classes, it was cool, you know? So do you think you have even like stories like that with like, that kind of like relate, like you said, like we relate it back to now, where it's like culturally, look at what they're doing today versus then.
So with the compromises, that's one of the reasons I like teaching the causes of the Civil War, because it is that failure of compromise. And you know, you're trying, but what happens when you are trying to make both sides happy and ultimately you are not, and you just continue to get closer and closer to whatever conflict is going to erupt. But I think even with like that push westward, you know, kids will talk about like, oh, it's terrible what happened to Native Americans. Like, well, of course it is, yes. But there was also this push of like, we've got all these people who are moving to the United States because there's the opportunity to own land. And Americans would say, well, we bought Louisiana. So if you were just like random farmer in 1862 and you have the opportunity to go actually purchase land, you do. And then of course that conflict is going to come with the natives who are like, this is not Louisiana, sorry. And so it's interesting when you can get kids to see the multiple perspectives. And you can agree with whoever you want to agree with, but I think being able to understand this is where the Native Americans are coming from. This is where the U.S. government is coming from. Average farmer who just wants, he's like, I just want to own some land. That's all I'm looking to do here.
That came here because he's like, listen, there's an opportunity for people. I'm going to try to get on this opportunity.
Right, because where I was, it's not working for me. I'm not going to progress at all. So if there's an opportunity, that's one of the things I try to stress, that people will always move toward where there are opportunities.
And their self-interest of what's going to better them.
Right.
And that's like how people naturally are. It's like, everyone's like, oh, but that's awful, this or this or this. But it's like, okay, but you have to remember, that's in a perfect world, obviously that wouldn't have happened.
Right.
But we live in a world where everyone's selfish to their own interests.
Right.
So this is how the reality of what's going to happen. So let's learn about, like you said, perspective. This person's perspective, this person's perspective. And then that's kind of how you learn about history. And it's like something really cool about history is like when you study history, then you can also understand the future.
Yes, because you identify patterns.
And that's how life works, It's like, it's kind of cool, like, going off of that. Because, like, for me personally, like, I've always liked history. Because, again, like, when you talk about it, it makes you think, like, okay, so then how could I prepare my own future by learning about the history? It's like, history always repeats itself. Like, it's all these quotes, but it's like, it's true.
Yeah.
Like, all these wars and problems happen because of the same types of conflicts.
Absolutely.
That are always happening throughout all of history, all of time.
Yeah. I always talk about how there are, like, the three things that bring conflict. And that is if you interfere with somebody's money. Like, conflict will happen.
Instantly, yeah.
If you interfere with somebody's power, conflict will ensue. And then if there are changes that are being brought about, there's probably going to be conflict. So if you can see some of these things like, we're going to do this thing and it's going to create like a bit of a power struggle, well, you should be able to predict that this is going to be a conflict. So how do we get in front of it? How do you try to, mitigate some of the hurt feelings that may come about with someone's pride when they feel like they are losing power, so that they don't react the way that people react when they feel like their money or their power or their like expected world is changing. People don't like those things, but it can be presented in a way for a lot of people that maybe it's not going to be the end of the world. Things evolve. And it may not be the way that it always has been, but it's still going to be okay.
Yeah, well, that makes sense. And kind of going off of like more things you're passionate about, I read here that like you're getting really into like garden designing and like your yard and stuff. So could you tell me a little bit about that?
So I used to kill all plants. My husband used to joke that I only bought plants that had a will to live. But I've gotten to be like pretty good at it. And, sometimes he'll find me, I'm just standing in the backyard and I'm just like, looking. Are you thinking? Are you thinking about where you're going to move plants? Because I move plants all of the time. And I love it. I love being able to like figure out like when things are going to be in bloom and making sure that you always have something that is just making it nice and feeling inviting if you go into the yard. So I really enjoy that. My girls kind of tease me and they're like, okay, we're going to the nursery. You have 20 minutes and I'm starting a timer now. And then for yourself and for us, we need to leave after 20 minutes.
Because you can be there all day looking at different colors and different things and different types of plants and asking certain questions. How long is this going to last? How long is this going to be? That's awesome. It's cool because my brother is like super into like gardening and stuff, and he's like been growing an apple tree basically. And like he bought like a indoor like little facility thing that's it's like an indoor growing tent or something, and he's been growing like his apple tree. And he just recently talked to me. He's like, hey, like I need to move this tree. It's getting too big. And it's like, wow, we watched it grow from seed. He germinated it all the way up to this, and then watching it become like almost as tall as we are.
That's amazing.
And it's like, wait, like we created this thing. Now how do we keep going to try to create an apple tree? And then what about grafting an apple tree and then creating one that we already know works that can actually produce flower, basically the apple. And it's so cool because like it's life, it's like watching life grow and bloom. It's like such an experience. And something that we do is we plant mint, which is an aggressive species. So like mint just grows to grow. Right. So it's really easy to grow. And my mom loves mint in her tea. And like it's like spearmint. It's like the smell is so rich, and it's like it makes the garden smell so nice. And it's like so much mint. And like I remember my mom making fun of her like, you destroyed my mint. And then like the next year when it all grows and it's like really nice, he's like, I told you, like I know what I'm doing. Like and like and like he loves it because it's like a passion, and like he wants to even get into like learning how to like raise your own chickens, cattle, and things. Because he's like, that's life. He's like, I want to know how to really do the life things. And like obviously like doing flowers and stuff, like when you see like flowers and the colorful and the smell and the fragrance and like the bees coming in, like the bees when like they transfer things, like all that energy is like healing. You know, it's like people. I remember reading something. It was like honeycomb, like bees and stuff. Like honey is a food that won't expire after thousands of years. You know, it's like bees. Like I saw someone saying like the hive and the combs and stuff. Like when you're around it all the time, it actually generates like a healing frequency.
Really?
So it's like cool because like then everyone's like, oh, that's why all these people who are beekeepers have such zen. Like they're so always so peaceful and like calm and like they can just tell they're healthy because like they're part of this experience and this energy that the honeycomb is. You know, it's like kind of cool to think about. And it's like again like something we believe like Islamically too is like honey is like can heal, and everyone knows like a teaspoon of honey if you're sick can help a sore throat. And it's like kind of cool. It's like we mix black seed oil and honey a lot, and like our teaching, like the black seed oil is known to cure so much. So it's like so cool to see like how like again like the ancient teachings where it's like thousands of years old knowledge is still prevalent today.
So what do you do with the black seed oil and the honey? Do you just like mix it together? And
they say it because the black seed oils. Like, I was just thinking about it. I shudder. Like because I take like veggie cellulose capsules and like there's black seed oil inside of them, and it makes it way easier to like ingest. Like the oil itself, like it's so strong. But the thing is, you feel it. Like when you like take like a teaspoon or tablespoon of it, and like you drink it, and like you just feel, you literally feel it go through your like body, and like you like start shaking, but then like mucus wise clears up instantly.
Really?
It just so, it's like such a breath of fresh air after, even though it's like a very strong taste. This is why honey, sweet thing to mix it with it is really nice.
Okay.
That's something that I'm like super into too. So it's cool to talk about gardening and stuff, and like it's life, you know, you get to see it grow.
I love it.
What's like, your favorite like flower combination or?
I mean, I just have like a very classic style, like a whole collection of boxwoods with some hydrangea. I like having like my roses and my lavender kind of there together. I've just started trying to get into figuring out how I want to put a collection of evergreens. So having like a tall yew bush, then with a shorter boxwood and then a smaller ground covered juniper kind of thing. So like how I can make it all like the different shapes come together but still have year round green. So that's my current project.
No, it'll look nice too, and it's like to see it all the time is like such a nice experience too, because like when you see life and colors and stuff, like they say like even walking in nature helps like your psyche so much. Like hearing running water all the time also is like a natural thing, like a psychological thing where it's like it eases you. That's why people are like, oh, the shower, it's theoretically it's running water. You hear it, and everyone's like, "Oh, my best ideas come in the shower." But it's because you're at peace. You're hearing running water. Your brain is calm, so you're thinking clearly.
Yes, and it allows your brain usually to just kind of like wander a bit, which I like.
Exactly, and it's cool because like it makes me realize like how much like life brings people together naturally too. Where it's like plants, simple.
Yes,
you know.
Just going out for a walk and the importance of people coming together. It makes a lot of things better when people just kind of sit down together and they find that commonality.
Of course. And going off that, I kind of want to ask you, like, what is something in life that you feel like you've done that you've been proud of?
I don't know. There are different things, but man, what am I proud of? I mean, I am proud of like my career and how I have just continued to hone my craft. It could be easy to just say like, well, read this part of the book and now answer these questions, and it would be a lot less work for me to do that. But I take a lot of pride in thinking constantly about how to best present, and for different classes, how do I put things together? So that's one thing. I am proud of my family. Like, I kind of look at my daughters and my husband, and I'm like, oh, this is amazing. I am so grateful that these people are my life and they're my family, and I get to spend this time with them. And I am proud of them because they have forced me to grow as a person. Yeah. Because there's nothing like bringing someone else into your life, like your spouse, but then kids, where it's like, okay,
And I was like, really? Yeah.
I've really got to, you've got to be, it pushes you to be more of the adult, to be, to just put other people first and not to think about, I'm frustrated right now and I just want to like, ugh.
Yeah.
You can't do that.
Yeah.
I mean, you can, but it's not really productive and you're not
Yeah.
teaching your kids productive ways to deal with frustration. So that has been, and I look at both my daughters and they're so very different.
Mm-hmm.
And they've both forced me to grow as a person. And I think that it makes me a better person. It makes me a better teacher.
Mm-hmm.
So every now and again, I'm like, 24-year-old me might have gotten like really frustrated about this thing.
Mm-hmm.
But now I'm like,
yeah,
it's okay.
And it's cool because it's also you constantly level up in life. You're constantly always
Mm-hmm.
raising your standards. You're constantly always leveling up naturally your mentality. And it's
Mm-hmm.
cool because something I saw recently was funny, and our friend was talking to me about it. He was like, dude, sometimes I'll get mad at my mom for this, or I'm like, why is she doing this? She doesn't understand. But then I'm like, wait, this is the first year she's 45.
Mm-hmm.
This is the first time she's ever been 46. This is the
Mm-hmm.
first time she's ever done this.
Mm-hmm.
So it's she's also growing the same way I'm also growing.
Mm-hmm.
Whether I have grown faster in certain aspects of life before she has,
Mm-hmm.
or not, it's okay because we're all still growing in this journey that life is. And it's kind of cool because sometimes as a kid, you don't realize that, wait, my parent is my parent, yes, but they're also learning and growing the same way I'm learning and growing.
Mm-hmm.
So it's how do you balance that learning and growing while they're also learning and growing?
Yeah, I always think about a person and having almost these different tracks. And, one is your emotional development or
Mm-hmm.
your academic development and your all of the different ways in which people develop, and seeing it's never just this steady progress. It is constantly, one is ahead of the other, or one is going more quickly,
Mm-hmm.
and then all of a sudden one was going quickly, but now it slows down and something else picks up. And
Yeah.
that is not something I really thought about when I was younger.
Mm-hmm.
So I think about it much more now because I like to observe people.
Mm-hmm.
I get a lot of joy out of just watching interactions with people.
Mm-hmm.
And high school is the perfect
Yeah.
place to observe
Yeah.
people. Because sometimes you see kids and I'm like, oh, look at them. This is just old-fashioned flirting is what this is.
Mm-hmm.
Or
It's cool to see it live. Yeah.
yes. And it's just, even if as we were discussing earlier, how slang changes or the way that kids talk to each other.
Mm-hmm.
It's if you can almost just be that fly on the wall and just observe for that sake, that's all I'm seeing is it's different from when I was a kid, but it's still, it still hums the same tune.
Yeah, there's always a level of okay, someone's teasing her. So I was he's teasing her, she's teasing him. In any time frame of life, that's okay. They're teasing each other because they're comforting each other, trying to get each other's attention. It's simple. It's common sense. It's oh, this person is dropped their pencil around them just to say something to her. It's you can see this little game that's being played.
Yes.
And I know it's so funny. I had a conversation with someone who had graduated high school maybe a year or two after me. We were laughing about something. I don't know how this conversation came up, but he was I remember if it was an A day or a B day, right? And he's oh, my B day had really cute girls in this one class. I always made sure my B day I came into school wearing my best outfit. I wear my nice shoes, and I made sure to put a little cologne on because I wanted to impress them. And it's so silly when we were laughing about it, but it's true. It's
yeah.
You'll casually see that no matter what time, age, or frame. It's going to be the same thing.
Right.
People want to impress others. People want
yes.
to feel this need of acceptance. And
yes.
I want to be part of this culture, this group, or I always want to talk to this girl when I'm nervous. So I have to do everything I can to be what she might like. You know, it's cool to see it. And I'm sure as again, a high school teacher, you see that all the time.
Yes, all day. You just watch the interactions happen, and sometimes you see oh, this is going smoothly, or other times it's oh, I've got one group right now where I just asked the girl because she was always teasing these two boys, and some days they took it well, and other days they were you're just mean, and finally, I just recently asked her, I was in your house, your family, you tease each other a lot, it's just how you communicate, and she was yeah, we tease all the time. And I was see, that's what she's doing. She's not being mean
or malicious.
Intentional. Yeah. And you're interpreting it that way, but that's just the way that they joke around. And it's, in some ways, it's this sign of affection, not that you should necessarily, if someone makes you feel badly.
And respect and love and care, because immigrant parents and anyone with immigrant parents will always say this. Like, they will take your deepest insecurities and put you on full blast. Like, if say like you gained a little weight, like, oh, how's my little chubby kid? Like, I'm like, Mom, like what? Like, it's like you can't just in front of people, family. It's like you're embarrassing me, but it's like that's how they show love. And it's like in any like all these different like families I know, it's like, dude, like my parents will just roast me in front of all my friends all the time. But it's like when they do that, it's because they love you, but they also tease you so that you become stronger and have a thicker set of skin.
Right.
And it's true because now, when my parents would do that stuff, when people were teasing me growing up, I never really got that offended unless it was like personal.
Right.
If it's personal, then it's personal, you know? But then it's like when people teased me about things, I was never offended. And I was like, you know what? That thicker set of skin did help, you know? So it's probably like, again, like there's pros and cons to it.
Right. So I hopefully they heard, like, she's not trying to be mean. She's just joking around, and that's how she talks.
Yeah.
But I don't know. We'll see how that one unfolds.
No, of course. And so one of the questions I always ask is, like, what is something most people don't know? And you said something like, I'm much nicer to people than I seem. Like,
Yes. So I know because, like, I'm a very private person. And so that's why being here is actually a very big deal for me.
No,
because
always pushing people out of their comfort zone.
You
right?
are. But so I'm a very private person, and because I am so private, I think a lot of times people interpret that as I'm just kind of standoffish or mean. Or when it comes to school, you know, I have high standards for my students, and so that often transitions to, she's so mean. And it's fun because sometimes you see some of the students who break through. I had a student who recently just made a TikTok in my classroom. It was during like his lunch. He didn't want to go to lunch. He came to my room. And so he and a couple other people made a TikTok. And the whole point was when they were, you know, you find out about a test last minute, so you study last minute, and then you're sitting there, and I gave him an old test, and he was
like made a little skit and stuff.
Yeah, and then I put an F on it for him, and he posted it, and some of the people were like, "Did Mrs. Clark, like, she was in that? How did you get her to do that?"
Yeah.
And he was like, "I asked her, and she said yes." So
yeah.
So I think that is something that I get is because I'm very private, and I don't talk a lot. You know, sometimes I feel like people just talk sometimes just
to hear
to
themselves
talk. Yes,
yeah.
and it's exhausting. So that is just interpreted as, well, she's mean. But I'm not a mean person.
No, I mean, personally, again, like being like a student of yours in the past, like I never thought you were a mean person ever. I always felt like, again, like you were, like you said, like you were like a no BS person. Like I knew if I went into your class on being stupid, like you were gonna be like, hey, like stop being stupid. And I was instantly gonna be like, okay, yeah, you're right. I should stop being stupid. Like it was like a sense of like instant, like, okay, cool. Like let me like straighten up. Cause like I think I had a class, one of your class near the end of the day. So it was like we were like, I was already buzzing. Like by the end of the day, like I had made so much social energy connection. So I was at my peak, like buzzing. Like I was just having a good time. But so like when I got into your class, I had so much energy. But then I always knew like one by one, like obviously the more class I'm gonna have with you, I was like, wait, like I can't just like come into this class like on 100%. Like I have to like take a chill pill, walk in, like relax, and just use the energy for the class rather than like just be buzzing. You know,
and that's a good way to put it. Use the energy for the class. And you know, when you're talking to 14 and 15-year-olds, sometimes a lot of them have not figured out how to channel that, and they're still working on it. But you know, that's part of my job is to point out like, hey, like this is not the way to do it. And most of the time, the kids are pretty good about like, okay.
Yeah.
I acknowledge.
Even when you were telling me the story of like someone made like a little video with you, it's like I feel like I would be a student who probably would have done something that too. So it's like makes sense. Like I feel like I would just asked you. I'd be like, hey, look, could we do this? Like it'd be cool, it'd be fun. Like, and it's like fun to do that, you know. So it's like again, people sometimes like maybe as a student you forget, but like your teacher is your teacher, yes, but it's also just an adult.
Right, just a person.
They got kids too. They have families. They have problems in life too. Like everyone kind of has that. And sometimes like as a kid, it's like maybe if you're a kid and if you have a teacher still and you're in college, it's like, wait, like these people are human beings too. It's like treat them as such and just watch how that same thing, that energy transfers to you. And I think something that I always took from high school even is when I was in high school, I did treat everyone as an equal, like student, teacher, faculty, janitor, whoever it was or I was talking to, had such friendly relations with everyone. So people then treated me the same way. And like I noticed the teachers that I didn't like were the ones that had that superiority complex over me, where they like tried to keep putting power over me. And then like you said, I'll push back. I'm like, you know what? I don't even care if this guy likes me or not because I already don't like him as a person.
Right. And I feel like he doesn't like me, so.
And the thing is, I always took it as a person. Like, I never thought of it as, that's my teacher. He doesn't like me because I'm a bad student. Because in my head, I was like, I'm a great student. Like, I do great in every class test I ever took. I didn't have to study or anything. I did fine. It was high school. But when someone didn't like me, it was because they didn't like me as a person. So then I knew it was personal, where it's like, okay, they just don't like me as a person. So then I'm going to make sure they know that I don't like them either as a person.
Right.
Without being, like, rude or cursing at them. But just let them know, like, listen, I'm gonna do my thing, you know. And there was a lunch detention teacher I had once, and like there was like one of the last times I had lunch detention in his like study hall, whatever they called it. He asked me, he's like, hey, like I just have a question for you. I'm like, what? He's like, how are you always in lunch detention? I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, dude, like you're a nice kid, like you're a nice kid, like I look at your like I look like, he's like obviously they can see like. I don't know if you guys still use Power School or see like I see your grades are fine, like you're in good classes, like why are you always in here? I'm like, I guess I just break rules and like I don't really care to get a lunch attention. He's like, huh? And like he almost thought like, why are you here anyways? Like why are you getting in trouble?
Right.
And like I remember getting like in school suspension. And like usually in school suspension for kids who are like actually doing some pretty like reckless things. But like I ended up getting into like situations where I'm like, I might be. And like everyone's like I'm like a all AP student in an ISS classroom and it's like I'm doing homework and everyone in there's like cursing at the teacher, like doesn't care that they're getting in trouble, and I'm like I'm finishing my work, and I was like sitting there bored for like 3 hours, basically doing nothing.
Right.
But that's just kind of cool. Like it kind of like shifts into that. Like, can you be like an adult within a student classroom, but then also be a teacher-student relationship?
And it's nice. Some of the kids are able to do that for whatever reason. You know, their natural personality. Sometimes it's because they have family members who are teachers, so they see it, you know, outside. But when you have someone where it's like, oh, we can just talk as a person. And it's nice to be able to break past that barrier.
Because again, that's what makes it more real. And that's like, I would say the joy of being a student and a teacher is, you know, it's like realizing like, wait, like they are my teacher, but they also could be my friend.
Yeah, and we can talk about things, and, you know, I can just be someone that, you know, sometimes kids need adults to talk to who are not their parents. You talk to your parents, but sometimes you just need to like bounce some ideas off of another person. And I kind of look at it as like all of us parents, like I want good things for your kids. So if your child decides that they're going to talk to me a little bit, I hope my own kids find some people that they are able to talk to who will help provide, you know, some good sound advice or just be a sounding board. But like the more positive adults a kid can have in their life, the better it is.
No, absolutely. And it just makes them a more well-rounded person in anyways. And just kind of going off to the end of obviously the show and everything. So there's a word that you want to learn Arabic. And it was so funny because obviously you gave me backstory to it. And this was like your first word.
Yes.
And it was so funny because when I read it like originally, I was like, wait, why does she want to learn this word? And I laughed. So it's obviously like a word like you could say because it's what it means. But like I wouldn't recommend saying it to anyone who speaks Arabic because it's like an insult, obviously.
Right.
But so the word that you want to learn was the word shit. And it's funny because like that being your first word, I kind of want to hear like the story about that.
So my mom always tells me how I did not speak as a baby. There was no baby talk. I was just silent and like apparently valuing my privacy even as a baby. And so like, you know, you take your baby to the doctor and the doctor always asks like the developmental questions. And I was like 2 years old, not talking yet. That's, you know, a little bit odd, particularly since this is the only child. I am an only child. And so then one day, shortly after that, we were in the kitchen together, and my mom would just give me like pots and pans and wooden spoons to play with. And so I went to pick one of the pots up and to move it, and I must have lost my grip on it, and I dropped it. And I just said, shit. And my mom was like, what? She finally speaks, and this is what I'm going to have to tell people was her first word? Like we'll come up with another story. Like she'll talk again and say something else.
That's like so funny because like you're like, what? Like how is that like a first word? But it's like it's just what you said. Like it's like, were you hearing it? Like,
oh yeah, my mom was like, oh, I need to clean up the language.
That's like a funny story then for her too. Like, well, my daughter's first word, like that. You know,
it's time for me to evaluate. If you know, like that whole thing, you grow as a parent. You're like, okay.
They're gonna pick up on things that you're not even thinking they might pick up on.
Yes.
But
then even so my younger daughter is learning French, just on her own, not a class, but she has an app that she uses.
Duolingo?
No,
Oh,
memorize.
Really? Is it? You think it's better than Duolingo?
Yes.
Okay.
You hear they have videos of people
Talking. Okay, that
yes,
makes
and so you
sense.
just get to see it, and it's better. So that's the one that works for her. And so she was going through like all the introductory things, like learn these 10 words and then learn these next 10 words. And like within word 30, shit. And she was like, Mom, look at what they think. I ought to know.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
So she now uses it sometimes like in the house in jest.
It's like
funny.
Yeah. So the word in Arabic is it's pronounced khara. Yeah, so it's like Khara, khara. And like obviously say it the same way, like khara.
Okay.
Like, but it's like the thing is that Arabic is funny because like when you say it, it's like it's insulting when you say it towards someone or something they did. Like, you know, but it's like you wouldn't say it like the same way we say it in English.
Okay.
It's like you wouldn't drop something and just say that. Which is why I would like when I said that I was like, I wonder if like this would be a simple word to like teach the same way because the context of the word tends to change.
Okay.
For us, like a word like that is like you know like when someone goes like oof, like OOF, like that's kind of like how you almost pronounce like that, like
okay.
Like distraught or like something happened.
Okay.
You know, so that's kind of how it is. But so the way I end the show obviously is I always ask like, what is one of your favorite quotes? And the quote you decided was, "You cannot learn that which you think you already know." And I would love to know kind of like how you feel about that and like your reasoning.
Okay. So a couple of years ago, I started getting into some of these Stoic readings. And I felt that it really helped my mindset as far as how I was approaching. Like at that point I had, you know, my girls were getting like very into that middle school age, and that is, it's never really a pretty age for anyone. And so I found myself getting frustrated, and I was like, I can't live like this. I've got to find a way to kind of, to work through it. And so I found that listening to some of the Stoic readings, it's like, okay, you know, sort of letting some of these things go and that being okay and not having to control certain things, and everything is still going to be all right in that case. So I found that to be very helpful. And then just that was one of the quotes that I heard that I thought, in life, I think if more people could adopt that attitude, it would be so helpful. Like I think professionally, you know, we talk about how we go to these meetings and we are lectured to. I'm like, you are going to do this, and this is how education works, and blah, blah, blah. I'm like, you haven't asked a single actual teacher. Like, input, what do we think? How about if we did this? And it is just that I know, and I'm telling you, this is how education works. But you don't actually teach kids.
So how would you know?
Right. But you are insistent that you know. So you cannot learn that which you think you already know. So I think professionally, that was something that kind of came out to me. But then I also was like, well, you have to take a look at yourself then, and what are the things that you think you already know, and you know, just trying to be a little bit more humble and peel back some of the trying to control. And this is how we do it. This is how we do it, and just. Well, what if we did something a little differently? And so like switching up some of my rules with phones in my own classroom. It's like, well, what is the purpose? Like, why do I have these rules? Is it because my bosses have told me this is how you're supposed to do things, but they're not the ones who are actually here enforcing that rule? So maybe I come up with something that I think makes more sense and try to work with people more rather than dictating to so much. Because it's very easy when you're in a position as a teacher, because you've got a lot of people, and so the easiest way to keep things on track is to dictate. We do this, we do this, we do this. And I've now kind of taken a bit of a step back. And it's different, and I think it's still okay, but that has been a way that I have tried to apply that to myself as well.
Yeah, I love that, and it's so cool because something that I recently like learned as well is like sometimes like if you don't know something, it's so easy to be like, hey, like, can I ask someone if they know something? And that's how information spreads.
Yes.
It's like the art of not knowing. And I think like it's really cool. It's like even if you know something, then teach it. It's like share that knowledge. Don't gatekeep knowledge. You know,
Right.
it's like actually talk about it with people. Be like, hey, like, what do you think about this? Then ask those questions. And it's like if I don't know 100%, or even if I know what I think I know, like I know this much, that I can talk about. But there's probably things within that topic I don't know about. So if you know this, let's add on to what I know and you know, and then we're just constantly learning this growth of this hive mindset. We're constantly growing the brain. And I think that's like a really important thing. Like you said, it really requires like to have an open mind and if you're to be humble and accept that you might not know something.
Right.
You know,
and it's so
huge.
Difficult for a lot of people to do, which is understandable.
You have to fight the ego. That's why.
And that's another one. Like ego is the enemy of just so much growth. And to just take that step back and be like, but if you look around, like you said, like your teachers are people, and you look at these other people. My bosses are people, and this person who is driving terribly and like blocking the intersection is a person. And to just a little bit more of that like grace toward other people, and it's not just for them, but I feel it's also so beneficial to you as a person.
Yeah.
When you don't hold on to that frustration. Just it's okay. Just let that go.
No, of course. And I just want to thank you again for like coming on to the show here with me. And it's just awesome, like have someone in from the past and bring someone in from the past and share my future with them.
I love it.
To me, like again, like thank you for like stepping out of your comfort zone too, because I know like again more of like an introverted natural person, but I knew it would be such a valuable conversation to have.
I'm
so I just want to
glad
thank
I did
you.
this.
No, of course. So thank you guys again for tuning into the Oli Kanoli Show. This was Miss Elizabeth Clark. So please leave a bunch of friendly comments down below for her. She's an awesome person, and she was an amazing teacher and really inspired me to kind of be the best version of myself, even as a young child. So again, thank you guys again for tuning in to another episode of the Oli Kanoli Show. Please leave nice comments down below. Subscribe, like, and follow, and share. Please, I'll see you guys next time on the Oli Kanoli Show. See you later.